Good evening, and welcome back to Worlds Before Morning. Tonight, we are going somewhere that no longer exists. That is all right. Nothing sad will happen while we are there. We are going to the Library of Alexandria. On one ordinary evening, a little more than 2,200 years ago, when it was alive and warm and full of lamplight, and nobody in it had any idea of being famous. You do not need to know anything about it. You do not need to remember anything or learn anything or stay awake for anything. The library will be looked after tonight whether you watch or not. The scrolls will be shelved. The lamps will be trimmed. The great lighthouse at the harbor mouth will burn all night, the way it burns every night, and the sea will lean against the stones of the city, like an old dog against a knee. So let yourself be comfortable. Let the bed hold your whole weight. Let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been all day, and let your hands lie open, and let your breathing find its own slow pace without any help from you. There is nothing to do here. That is the whole point of this place tonight. The day's work is over. The reading is done. Every argument in every hall has been set down gently, like a cup, to be picked up again tomorrow. What is left is the good part, the closing up part, doors easing shut, lamps being carried down long corridors by people who know the way in the dark. If you fall asleep in the first few minutes, that is a success. If you drift in and out, hearing a little about scrolls, a little about the harbor, a little about an old man counting shelves, that is a success too. The story asks nothing of you. It will simply go on ahead of you quietly into the small hours, and you can follow it exactly as far as you like and no further. One more thing before we go in. You may know that this library did not last forever. Nothing does. But tonight is not that night. Tonight is one of the thousands upon thousands of completely safe evenings this place enjoyed. Evenings when nothing at all happened, except that the light faded, and the lamps were lit, and everyone went home or went to bed. That is the evening we are visiting. It deserves to be remembered as much as any other kind of night, maybe more. If these quiet nights help you sleep, there is one small kindness you can do us. Subscribe so the next world can find you, and leave a word below telling us where in the world you are listening from. We read everyone in the mornings, and the thought of all those quiet rooms going dark, scattered across every country and every time zone, is the best lamp we know. Wherever you are tonight, you are welcome here. This hour is yours. Here is the road we will walk, though you need not remember it. We watch the white city turn gold at sunset, and see the harbor put down its work. We climb the great lighthouse while its fire is fed. We walk the reading halls as the last light goes, watch the scrolls put to bed and the copyists lay down their pens, and pay our respects to the Catalogue of Everything. We sit with the scholars at supper, stroll the gardens, and learn how the books come in from the sea and how they are made from the river's own reeds. We look in on the physicians, the schoolroom, the second library on the hill, and the warm baths. We sit a while with one old keeper and 9 cats who guard the memory of the world. And we end, as we always end, in the smallest hours, with the whole city asleep and the great light burning over the dark water. The city is called Alexandria. It sits on the northern edge of Egypt, where the desert meets the sea, white as a shell and young as cities go. The evening is warm. The wind is from the north off the water, and it smells of salt and stone. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps. You can sleep too. Here we go. From the sea, at sunset, Alexandria looks like something the light made and forgot to put away. The whole city is white, limestone and marble and pale plaster, street after street of it, laid out in straight lines on a ribbon of land between the Mediterranean and a quiet lake. When the sun goes down behind it, the white takes the color of the sky and holds it. For a little while the city is rose, then gold, then the soft gray of a dove's wing. The sailors coming in on the evening wind watch it change and do not say much. There is nothing to say. It is simply the most beautiful thing most of them will ever see, and they see it every time they come home. It is a young city, as cities go. An old fishing village stood here first, on this same shore, for longer than anyone can count. Then, about 100 years before tonight, a young king drew a plan in the sand, or so the story goes, and the city grew up out of the plan, the way a garden grows out of seed rows. Straight streets, wide as rivers, colonnades that run for a mile without a bend, a causeway striding out across the water to the island offshore, so that the sea is divided into two harbors, one for the war fleet and one for the world. And the world comes. That is the thing about this city. The thing you would notice first if you walked its long main street this evening. Everyone is from somewhere. Egyptian families who have farmed this coast since before the pyramids. Greeks whose grandfathers came with the founding. Traders from Rhodes and Cyprus, from Carthage far to the west. From lands so far east that their names arrive worn smooth from travel, like sea glass. You can hear 6 languages between one fountain and the next, and nobody turns their head. This evening, the long main street is emptying out, slowly, comfortably, the way a street empties when nobody is worried about anything. The shopkeepers along the colonnades are folding their awnings. The fruit sellers are giving the last soft figs away to children, rather than carry them home. A water carrier makes his final round, and the splash of his ladle into the household jars is one of the small evening sounds of every quarter, along with sandals on stone and someone's supper fire beginning to crackle in a courtyard. Down by the water, the fishing boats are in. They lie hauled up on the sand in a long, patient row, masts bare, nets spread to dry on the gunwales. The fishermen sit among them, mending what the day tore, working by feel as the light goes, talking in the low, unhurried way of men whose work is done. Tomorrow they will go out again before dawn. Tonight the sea can have the dark to itself, and rising over all of it, over the white streets and the drying nets and the smoke of 10,000 suppers, stands the lighthouse. It stands on the island, at the harbor mouth. It is the tallest thing anyone in this city has ever seen. A tower of pale stone in 3 great stages, square, then 8-sided, then round, going up and up until the eye gives out. At its top, a fire is being fed as the daylight fails. We will climb up there soon, you and I. For now it is enough to see it the way the city sees it at dusk. A still white column against the first stars, with a warm point of light waking at its crown. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps. Or rather, the library is getting ready to sleep, and we are going to walk over and watch it do so, as slowly as we like. The great harbour of Alexandria goes to bed the way a big household does. Not all at once, but room by room, lamp by lamp. The deep-sea ships gave up first. They have been still since late afternoon, moored bow to stern along the quays, their sails furled, and their crews paid off into the evening. These are the wide-bellied merchantmen that cross the whole sea, from Italy and Greece and the islands, carrying wine and silver and oil and timber, and carrying away grain, always grain, for Egypt feeds half the world. Their hulls creak softly at their moorings now, rocking on the smallest swell the breakwater lets through. A ship at sea works every minute. A ship in harbor rests all over, every plank of her at once, and you can almost hear the difference. The harbor men go next. All day this waterfront is one long argument of loading and unloading, tally sticks and rope and shouted numbers. Now the last gang breaks up outside a warehouse, whose doors have just boomed shut. The overseer runs his seal across the lock, tugs it once, and that is that. The men drift away along the quay in twos and threes, toward home, toward supper, toward the bathhouse if there is anything left in the purse. Their voices trail behind them and dissolve into the general soft murmur of the city at evening. The customs house shuts its ledgers. There is a fat man at a table by its door, the harbour master's clerk, who has spent the entire day writing down what came in. Wine of Chios, 40 jars. Timber of Lebanon, 90 beams. He writes a clean line under the day, the way clerks everywhere end a day, and blows on the ink and rolls the register shut. The pleasure of a closed ledger at dusk is a small pleasure, but it is a real one, and he takes his time about it. Out on the water, the harbor patrol boat makes its slow evening circle, oars dipping without hurry. The rowers keep no particular rhythm. It is a formality, this last round, a way of saying the day is over on behalf of the whole port. They pass under the sterns of the anchored grain ships, past the chained mouth of the royal harbor, where the warships sleep in their sheds, along the great causeway and back. The water they cross is turning the color of dark wine, and the first lamps of the city lie in it, upside down and trembling, like a second city too shy to hold still. By full dark, the harbor belongs to the small sounds. Rope against wood, the bilge slap of water under 100 quiet hulls, a watchman on a grain ship humming to himself, an old tune from somewhere up the river, 3 notes falling and rising. On the breakwater, a boy sits with a fishing line he has no real hope for, because the fishing is not the point. The point is the evening and being in it, and putting off bed a little longer. And boys in harbors are born knowing that particular art. Above him, the lighthouse fire is fully awake now, throwing its long, steady gleam across the harbor mouth. The boy can see the tiny figures of the keepers moving against the glow, high up, tending it. He thinks their job is the finest in the world. He is not entirely wrong. The great light burns over the harbor, and behind the harbor, in the royal quarter, the library is closing its long day. It is time we went there. We can take the quiet streets. Nobody is in a hurry, least of all us. But first, the lighthouse. We promised the climb, and evening is the right time for it, while the stairs are still warm from the day. The tower stands on the little island called Pharos, joined to the city now by the long causeway, and it is so tall that from its top the world curves, 300 feet and more of pale stone, the tallest built thing under the sky except the pyramids themselves, and those are tombs, and this is the opposite of a tomb. This is the most awake building on earth. It has one job, and its job is to be seen. Inside, the tower is a spiral of ramps and stairs, wide enough for the donkeys that carry the fuel. Up they go, patient as the tide, panniers loaded with dry acacia wood and reed bundles from the lake shore, load after load, day after day. The fire at the top eats steadily, and the tower's whole inner life is arranged around feeding it, the way a household is arranged around a hearth. By this hour, the last fuel train of the day has gone up and come down, and the ramps are empty, and our climb is a private one. Around and around, through the slit windows, the city appears and disappears, each time smaller. Now the roofs are below us, now the masts, now even the temple pediments, and the windows show nothing but sea on one side and the darkening delta on the other, and still the stairs go up. The keepers live at the top, in the 8-sided middle stage, 4 of them in rooms the shape of pie slices. It is a strange employment, being lighthouse men. They are half sailors, half priests of a fire that must not go out. Tonight the oldest of them, A gray Egyptian who has kept this light for 30 years, is doing what he does at every dusk. He is standing at the parapet with his supper bread in his hand, watching the sun go down behind the city, checking the sky for weather with one long look, the way a shepherd reads a hillside. Then the fire. It burns in a great bronze basin at the very top, under a canopy of stone, and behind it stands the mirror, a broad sheet of polished bronze, curved with a care that took a lifetime of skill. The mirror gathers the loose firelight and throws it out to sea in one long beam. The keepers feed the basin through the night in shifts, log by log, and trim it and rake it, and the long beam stands steady out over the dark water, and every ship for 30 miles knows exactly where the world is. Think of what that means for a moment, and then you can let the thought go. All along this coast, the night sea used to be a guess. Now there is a fixed star with a fire in it, lit by human hands every evening without fail, and a sailor far out in the dark can look up from his steering oar and find it and breathe out. Landfall is no longer a hope. It is a fact burning. The old keeper finishes his bread. Below him, the city has gone fully to lamplight. Thousands of small warm points in the blue dark, and the harbor lies like spilled ink stitched with gold. He can see the royal quarter from here, the palace gardens, the theater's curved shell, and there, among the gardens, a long, low complex of halls and courts with its own modest lamps moving in it, unremarkable from this height, easy to miss. That is the library. That is where all of this was thought of, in a way. The mirror's curve, the tower's mathematics, the charts the captains steer by, it all comes from those low lamplit halls, and the old keeper knows it, and he nods toward them once. A small professional greeting from one keeper of light to another. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps. Nearly. Let us go down and catch it before it does. The library is not one building. It is easier to think of it as a neighborhood of thought, folded into the royal quarter among the gardens. A settlement of halls and porches and courtyards that has grown for 3 generations the way coral grows, room by room, need by need. The Greeks who run it call the whole institution the Mousean, the house of the Muses, and the library proper is its bookish wing. There are lecture halls and a dining hall and a long covered walk for thinking in bad weather, though the weather here is almost never bad. There are gardens with benches placed exactly where the shade will be at noon, and there are the book halls themselves, high-ceilinged rooms lined to the beams with wooden shelving, opening one into the next like chambers of a shell. At this hour, the reading day is ending. The rule of the halls is daylight. Scrolls and open flames are old enemies, so the library works while the sun works, and the last hour of reading is a golden one. The light comes in low through the high western windows, lies along the floors in long warm bars, and climbs the shelf ends. Dust drifts through it unhurried. Dust in a library is not dirt. An old scholar here likes to say, it is the books breathing. A few readers are still at the tables, finishing. There is a young man from Rhodes copying out lines of Homer for his teacher, hurrying against the light, tongue between his teeth. There is a physician making notes from a treatise on the pulse, and a gray-headed geometer who has been sitting motionless before a single open scroll since mid-afternoon, doing the kind of reading that looks like sleeping, and is the opposite. One by one they surface, blink, look around at the reddening light, and begin to roll up. Rolling up a scroll properly is a small ceremony, and everyone here does it well. You roll from both ends evenly, so the papyrus is never bent against its grain. You tie the cord in a bow that will slip open with one pull. You slide the scroll back into its linen sleeve if it has one, and you leave it on the table, squared with the edge for the shelvers. You do not reshelve it yourself. Readers who reshelve are the ruin of libraries, and the staff here would rather you dropped a scroll in the harbor than put it back in the wrong pigeonhole, where it might sleep lost for a generation. The young man from Rhodes finishes his last line just as the light goes too rosy to trust. He sits back and shakes his cramped hand and grins at nothing. The geometer stands, stiff as a folding rule, and bows slightly to the scroll before him, which is 400 years old and has outlived everyone who ever argued about it. An attendant moves along the western wall, drawing the shutters half closed, and the long gold bars on the floor narrow one by one. Another attendant passes through the halls with the soft evening call they use here. The same words every dusk, worn smooth as harbor steps. The light is going, friends. The light is going. It is a gentle way to be asked to leave, and it works. By the time the first true shadow reaches the tables, the halls are empty of everyone except the people whose work is only now beginning. The closers, the shelvers, the keeper of the days, borrowings with his list. The library at evening belongs to them, and they move through it with the easy ownership of night nurses on a quiet ward. The great light burns over the harbor, and in the long halls the golden bars have faded to gray, and the books are all going home to their shelves. Every scroll in this place has an address, and the putting of each one back at its own address is the great calm task of the library's evening. The shelvers work in pairs, one reading tags, one climbing. The shelving is honeycomb work, wooden pigeonholes rising well past reach, so the climber goes up a short ladder that hooks over a rail. It slides along with a low wooden song, the most familiar sound of this hour. From each scroll's end hangs a small tag on a cord, and on the tag is the author and the work, so that a shelf of scrolls presents itself as a fringe of neat labels, like a bed of flowers all facing outward. Herodotus goes home. The young man's Homer goes home, into a pigeonhole where lie its brothers, copy after copy of the same poem, some plain, some grand, one so old and soft it is read only by permission. The treatise on the pulse goes home among the physicians. The geometer's ancient scroll is carried back by the senior shelver personally, both hands, the way you carry a sleeping child through a house. The honeycombs go on, hall after hall, wall after wall. Nobody alive has read all of this. Nobody alive could. That is the strange and wonderful fact at the center of this place, and the shelvers feel it every evening without needing to say it. Somewhere in these walls is everything anyone has managed to write down and keep, the whole long argument of the world so far, and at dusk it all gets tucked in like one enormous sleeping household. Plays lie down next to farming manuals. Star charts sleep above cookery. The philosophers are shelved together, which the shelvers privately find funny. All those quarrelsome men pressed side by side in the dark, quiet at last. The evening count is taken hall by hall. The keeper of borrowings walks with his list of what went out to the scholars' rooms, checks it against what has come back, and marks the strays without alarm. Scrolls stray here the way cats stray, to somewhere comfortable nearby, and they come back on the same schedule, when hunger or conscience moves the borrower. In the third hall, one pigeonhole gets special treatment, as it does every night. It holds the oldest thing in the library, older than the library, older than the city. It is an Egyptian scroll from far up the river, brittle as a wasp's nest, its pictures drawn by a hand that was dust before Homer was born. It is not read anymore. It is simply kept and dusted with a feather, and looked at for a moment each evening by whichever shelver closes that hall, partly out of duty and partly out of something that has no good name in Greek or Egyptian either. Respect is close. Tenderness is closer. The last ladder slides home along its rail. The senior shelver stands a moment in the doorway of the last hall, doing what senior people in every trade do at the end of the day, which is nothing. Just looking. 10,000 small labeled sleepers, all in their places, all safe. He pulls the door to. It closes with a sound like a book shutting, which is fitting, because that is more or less exactly what has happened. The great light burns over the harbour, and the library sleeps. The books do anyway. In a room off the second court, there are still pens moving, and we will tiptoe over and watch them, because the copyists' room at lamplighting is one of the good sights of this whole city. The copying room lives by different rules from the reading halls. It faces north for the steady light, and it is the one room where lamps are allowed after dusk, because copying is the library's heartbeat, and the heart does not keep office hours. Understand what copying means here. Papyrus is tough, but nothing is forever. Every scroll in those honeycombs is slowly wearing out, softening at the edges, going brittle at the ends. And the only way a book survives the centuries is to be reborn, letter by letter, through somebody's hand. That is the work of this room. It is the quietest possible form of rescue. A dozen desks stand in 2 rows, and at this hour 4 are still occupied. The copyists sit cross-legged or on low stools, each with his exemplar propped at an angle, each with his fresh roll advancing under his right hand. The pens are cut reed. The ink is soot and gum, mixed fresh each morning in small pots. And the sound of the room is one of the great subtle sounds of the world. A dozen soft, dry whispers, not quite rhythmic like leaves in a courtyard, or the sea heard from far inland. The men themselves are a mixed bag, as copyists always are. One is young and fast and slightly too proud of his hand, and his supervisor prunes his flourishes weakly, like a gardener. One is old and slow and utterly exact, and has copied in his 40 years at this desk more words than a man could speak aloud in a lifetime. One is copying a text he loves, and it shows in a certain warmth of the letters. One is copying a text he finds unbearably tedious, a treatise on customs duties, and that shows too in a certain marching grimness, though the letters are no less true. Professional pride is a kind of love as well, and often a more reliable one. The lamps come around at full dark, brought by a boy who sets one at each occupied desk, well to the left, away from the exemplar. The little flames steady, and the room becomes 4 islands of warm gold in a sea of shadow, each island holding one pool of light, one old text, one new text, one moving hand. There is an evening habit in this room, old as the room itself. When a copyist finishes his final line of the day, he does not simply stop. He reads back the last sentence, aloud but only just under his breath, checking it against the exemplar, and then he draws a small tick in the margin wax of his count board and says a word of thanks. To whom, it is not clear. To the author, perhaps, or the ink, or the light. It is the same word the farmers say up the river when the water reaches the end of the furrow. One by one, the 4 islands go dark. The fast young man finishes first, of course. The old exact one finishes last, of course, and rises like a ship's mast coming upright, and pinches his lamp himself, trusting no boy with the room's last flame. He stands a moment in the dark, letting his eyes remember it. Then he goes out past the night porter, who nods to him the particular nod that porters save for the last man out, a nod that means the building is now ours, and yours is done, and both parts are as they should be. Behind him, the copying room settles, inkpots stoppered, reeds laid in their grooves. On every desk, a half-grown book waits under a linen cloth for morning, its letters drying in the dark, its sentences stopped mid-breath. They can wait. That is the whole art of this place. Everything here has learned how to wait. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps, and its tomorrow's books sleep greenest and newest of all. Somewhere near the center of the library, in a hall of its own, lies a book about the books. It is the largest thing anyone here has ever made, and the quietest. And tonight, like every night, it gets the last visit of the closing round. It began 2 generations ago with a man named Callimachus, a poet with a list-maker's soul, or perhaps a list-maker with a poet's soul. The argument continues, faced with halls of scrolls arriving faster than anyone could read them. He did the thing that changes everything in every age. He wrote it down, all of it, author by author, work by work, whole by whole. What it is called, how it begins, how many lines it runs, where it lives. The result filled 120 scrolls just to list the rest, and it is called the Pinakes, the tables, and it stands in its own honeycomb like a small library inside the large one. It is not grand to look at, but ask the people who work here and they will tell you, some shyly, some outright, that this is the treasure. Any city can pile up scrolls, given money and ships. The tables are what turn a pile into a library. They are the difference between owning the world's memory and being able to find it. Watch how it is used, even now at closing. The keeper of borrowings has one stray he could not account for. A treatise on winds requested this morning by a scholar who then sailed, of all things, leaving no note. The keeper walks to the tables, draws the scroll of authors whose names begin the right way, walks his finger down the entries, each in the same patient format, and there it is. The work, its opening words, its length, its home. He crosses the room, opens the right hall, finds the pigeonhole, and discovers the treatise exactly where a tidy-minded scholar would have returned it before sailing. 1 hole to the left of correct, 4 minutes beginning to end. In any other collection of this size on earth, that scroll would have been lost until somebody tripped over it in 20 years. The under-librarian who keeps the tables now, a careful Egyptian Greek with ink permanently under his nails, spends his days entering the new arrivals. And there are always new arrivals. Tonight, before closing, he enters 3. A book of remedies from Kos, a history nobody has heard of, from a town nobody has heard of, which is precisely the kind of book he privately likes best, and a comedy, slightly scorched along one edge, of which more later, for it came off a ship, and the story of how the library gets its books from ships is a chapter of its own. He writes the last entry, dries the line with a breath, and rolls the day's scroll of the tables closed. The catalogue is now, once again, complete. It will be incomplete again by mid-morning tomorrow, and complete again by tomorrow night, and so on forever. Or for what these people, on this warm evening, have every reason to believe will be forever. He sets the scroll in its place and stands back, and gives the honeycomb of the tables the same look the harbour master's clerk gave his closed register. A whole day ruled off, a whole world in order. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps, and even the list of its dreams is put away where it can be found. Before the library was a library, it was a temple, and it has never stopped being one. The whole institution, halls and gardens and dining room and all, is dedicated to the 9 Muses, the quiet goddesses of memory's children. And at its center, easy to walk past, stands the small hall that holds their shrine. At dusk, when the reading halls close, this room closes last, and it closes with ceremony, and the ceremony is worth staying for. The hall is modest, deliberately so, a cool room of gray marble, a low altar, and the 9 figures standing in their shallow niches, each with her emblem. the muse of history with her scroll, the muse of astronomy with her globe, the muse of the flute, the muse of the dance, the muse of sacred song. They are not large statues, and they are not new. Their paint has gone soft with age, and the marble shows through at the shoulders and the folds, the way stone will when generations of hands have touched it, gently, in passing, for luck or love or habit. Every scholar of the Mausian is, on paper, a member of this temple. That is the legal shape of the whole arrangement. On paper, the king does not pay 100 clever men to think. He endows a shrine. The 100 clever men are its fellowship, and their thinking counts as service to the Muses. You may call that a polite fiction, and the treasury men certainly do, but stand in this hall at dusk, and the fiction does not feel so fictional after all. What else would you call it? What these people do all day, the tending of old voices, the keeping of the flame of sense, if not a kind of service at a kind of altar. The priest of the shrine, an elderly scholar who holds the office by rotation and takes it more seriously than his colleagues expected, comes in at last light with a small lamp and a dish of honey cakes. The offering is old-fashioned and plain, a little light, a little sweetness, set on the altar at the feet of the nine, with a murmured line of verse so worn by daily use that it has stopped being poetry and become something better, a household phrase, the way grace before meat is in other houses. He stands a moment, as the office requires, and because he is a scholar to the bone, his moment of devotion is indistinguishable from a moment of proofreading. He inspects the 9 faces in the lamplight, checks the altar linen, notes that the muse of comedy needs her niche replastered before winter, and loves them, all 9, in the exact way he loves the texts he has spent his life correcting, attentively, without illusion, beyond argument. The lamp is left burning. It is the one flame permitted near the halls all night, small and enclosed and watched by stone goddesses, and the porter on his rounds will look in on it twice before morning. 9 ladies and a night light. The shelvers call this room fondly. The scholars pretend not to use the phrase. The scholars all use the phrase. The great light burns over the harbour, and the library sleeps, and at its center, in a cool gray room, a flame the size of a fig burns all night before the mothers of memory. The scholars of the Mausian eat together, at the king's expense, in a long hall with the doors open to the garden, and supper is the hinge of their whole day. Before it they are rivals, after it they are housemates. The food does something to them that no decree could. There are perhaps 100 of them on the rolls, though never all present, geometers, physicians, poets, grammarians, men who study fish, men who study stars, one man who studies nothing but the flooding of the river and is teased for it and does not care. They hold their posts for life, with free bread and a stipend and no duties except to think. That sounds like paradise, and mostly is, though like every paradise it has its politics. A wit once called this place the birdcage of the Muses. All these rare creatures kept and fed and singing at each other. The scholars repeat the joke themselves, which tells you most of what you need to know about them. Tonight the talk runs the way it always runs. 3 or 4 conversations braided loosely down the long table. At one end a quarrel about a line of Homer, conducted with great energy and no malice, the same quarrel these men's teachers had, and their teachers' teachers. By now it is less an argument than an heirloom, brought out and polished at supper the way a family brings out a story everyone knows. At the other end the fishman is describing, with breadcrumb diagrams, the arrangement of a squid, to the poet beside him, who did not ask, but who finds himself leaning in anyway, because the squid, it turns out, is a poem. In the middle sits the old geometer we saw at his scroll, saying nothing, eating slowly, entirely content. Around him, the talk laps like harbor water. Somebody cites a text. Somebody disputes the citation. Somebody says the fatal words. We can check it. And three men push back their stools. Then remember the halls are shut, and sit down again with the special frustrated pleasure of scholars who must wait until morning to be proven right. The library trains even impatience into a kind of rhythm. All questions here end the same way, not with a shout, but with an appointment. The lamps burn low and sweet. The kitchen boys clear the boards and take their pick of the leavings, which is the oldest of kitchen wages, and rightly so. One by one, the scholars rise, stretch, and drift out into the garden dark, some to their rooms, some to walk a little, two of them, as always, to continue the Homer quarrel at a slow stroll, around and around the fountain court, their voices getting lower and fonder with every circuit until the argument is indistinguishable from friendship. It is worth saying plainly, while we watch them go, nothing that happened at this table tonight will be recorded. No discovery was made at supper, and yet this table, this nightly braid of talk and bread, is the engine of the whole place. Ideas do not live in scrolls. Scrolls are only where ideas sleep. They live in exactly this. In talk over food, in the leaning in the squid explained to the poet. And this city understood that, and built a dining hall to house it, and fed it every night for 3 generations and more. The last lamp in the supper hall is carried out. In the garden, the fountain keeps its own small conversation going. Alone now, perfectly happy, the great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps, and its 100 minds are being walked slowly home through the smell of jasmine. The gardens of the Mousean were planted for thinking, which is a real kind of gardening with its own rules. And after dark, you can read those rules in the dim like a second catalogue. The paths are wide enough for 2, because thinking here is done in pairs, allowed at a stroll. They are laid in long straight reaches because a turn interrupts a sentence. And they are sanded, not paved, because sand is quiet underfoot, and a thought can be startled by your own heel on stone. Where the paths do turn, they turn around something worth pausing at. A fountain, an old plane tree, a stone bench set exactly where the sea wind funnels between 2 buildings on hot nights. The planting is scent more than show, and evening is when you understand why. A garden read by lamplight is invisible, but a garden of jasmine and rosemary and sweet marjoram reads itself to you in the dark, chapter by chapter, as you walk. The old head gardener, dead these 10 years, used to say he was shelving smells, and the scholars still quote him, and still find nothing to improve in the phrase. At this hour the garden holds its last few users, spaced out like the evening stars. The 2 Homer quarrelers on their 4th circuit, voices down to a murmur. A young astronomer flat on his back on the driest lawn, hands behind his head, doing what looks like idling and is in fact his entire profession. And on the bench by the fountain, the library's oldest resident, a grammarian of nearly 90, who comes out every night at this time, in every season, to sit for a while in the dark and listen to the water. He has been at the Mousean for 60 years. He knew men who knew the founders. When he was young, he burned to write a great work that would carry his name down the ages, and he never wrote it. And somewhere in his 50s, he noticed that he had stopped minding. His life had gone, instead, into other people's books. Corrections, clean copies, 1,000 small rescues of other men's sentences. His name is in the margins of half the halls, in small neat letters, and nowhere on a single spine. And he has come to see, sitting by this fountain year after year, that the margins were the honest place for him, and that a man could do far worse than to be, for 60 years, useful to the truth in small ways. The fountain agrees with everything. That is its genius. It has been agreeing with everyone who ever sat here, gently, all night long, for 3 generations. The night porter makes his garden round at the second hour of darkness, lantern swinging low. He does not hurry anyone. He simply passes, and his passing is the signal, gentle as the shelver's evening call. The astronomer sits up, brushing grass from his hair, having settled something about the moon to his satisfaction. The quarrelers finish their circuit and part at the colonnade, with the short nod of men who will resume at breakfast. The old grammarian rises last, both hands on his stick, and says good night to the fountain, out loud, without embarrassment. At 90, you say good night to whatever you please. The garden empties. The jasmine keeps broadcasting into the dark, wastefully, sweetly, to no one, which is perhaps the most scholarly thing in the whole garden, publishing all night whether anyone reads or not. The great light burns over the harbour, and the library sleeps, and the sand paths hold the day's footprints until the morning rake. Every book in this library came from somewhere, and most of them came the same way everything comes to Alexandria, by ship. If the halls are the library's memory, the harbour is its mouth, and the story of how the mouth feeds the memory is told in this city with a certain pride and a certain smile. Here is the famous arrangement. By standing decree of the kings, any ship that puts in at Alexandria must declare, along with its cargo, its books, whatever written thing is aboard, a merchant's geometry, a captain's sailing directions, a passenger's beloved comedy, is brought ashore to the library, where the copyists take it in hand. The ship gets back a fresh, fair copy, beautifully made. The library keeps the original. The entry in the catalogue says, simply from the ships. You may ask whether the ship's owners find this entirely fair, and the honest answer is that fairness depends a great deal on which end of the bargain you are holding. But it is also true that the copies are excellent, and the delay is small, and there are captains who now arrange to be caught, so to speak, sailing in with some rarity on purpose, because the library pays well for what it truly lacks, and pays in more than silver. There are worse things for a captain's reputation than being known in the halls of Alexandria. Tonight's arrival, the scorched comedy we glimpsed in the catalogue, came in this afternoon on a grain ship out of Rhodes, and its story is the ordinary kind of miracle. The captain's late father loved the play and carried it every voyage. The scorch is from a galley brazier 20 years ago. The captain himself has never read it, cannot read at all, but carries it the way you carry a father. And when the library men came aboard, he handed it over with instructions so fierce and so tender that the under-librarian wrote them down. Copy it well. It goes back with me, the old one, not your new one. The new one is for you. So tomorrow the fast young copyist, prunings and all, will make the library's copy, and the original, scorch and thumb marks and all, will go back to sea, where by every rule of preservation it should have perished 20 years ago, and where, by every rule that matters more, it belongs. The under-librarian who logs the ship's books keeps, in a private roll, a list of the strangest things the sea has brought, sailing directions for a cold ocean no one at the Mousean quite believes in, a merchant's phrase book of a language no scholar could place, now beloved by the grammarians, who quarrel about it happily on winter nights, a love poem in Egyptian, very old, found tucked inside a treatise on anchors, where some sailor hid it or lost it or left it, and which the library has never moved, on the private judgment of 3 successive under-librarians, each of whom decided the poem was exactly where its owner wanted it. That is the library's mouth. It is open every day the sea is, and the sea is generous, and the halls fill, scroll by scroll, ship by ship, year by year, with no plan except the large, calm plan of wanting everything. The great light burns over the harbor, guiding tomorrow's books in across the dark water, and the library sleeps, and does not yet know what it will be given. There is one more harbor smell we have not followed, and it is the deepest one, under the salt and the tar and the cooking oil. Grain. Alexandria is the granary of the world, and even at night, with every warehouse shut, the whole port smells faintly of harvest, like a barn at a distance, and it is worth one drowsy chapter to understand why. Egypt is a strange and blessed machine, and the river is the machine's heart. Every summer, far to the south, rains fall that no one here ever sees. The river rises, spreads brown and easy over the flat fields, lays down its gift of new earth and withdraws. Into that soft ground the farmers cast their seed, and the ground does the rest. No other land on the sea works like this. Elsewhere, farmers plead with the sky. Here, the water comes up from below, on schedule, and the wheat stands up out of the mud like a crowd rising. And there is more of it, year upon year, than Egypt itself could ever eat. So the surplus flows north, down the river, on barges beyond counting, to the lake harbor, through the canals, into the long stone warehouses that stand rank upon rank behind the quays. And from there it goes out across the water, to feed cities that have outgrown their own fields. Athens eats this wheat. Rhodes eats it. The islands eat it. Half the loaves in half the ports of the Middle Sea began as mud between a barefoot farmer's toes. 1,000 miles up this river, under the same stars we are lying beneath tonight, the grain fleet is the whole port's calendar. When the sailing season opens, the big ships go out heavy and come back light, and the rhythm of loading them, sack by sack, gang by gang, chant by chant, is the pulse of the waterfront for months on end. The measures are checked by the royal inspectors, sworn men with sealed bronze scoops, because a city that feeds the world learns honesty the way sailors learn knots, as a matter of survival. The clerks tally in the old way, notches and knots and heaps of pebbles, faster than you would believe, and their tallies go up to the offices, and the offices, in the end, report to the same crown that funds the library, which is a fact worth holding for a moment before sleep, because this is the plain truth of the place we have been walking all night. The scrolls are paid for in wheat. The lighthouse was raised on wheat. The copyists' wages, the scholars' suppers, the cat's sardines, all of it, every reed pen and every marble muse, floats on that slow brown river and its inexhaustible mud. The deepest shelf in the library is the delta itself. Other kingdoms turned their surplus into wars mostly, and got what wars get. This one, whatever else it has done, turned a remarkable share of its bread into memory. And the memory, as we know better than they did, turned out to be the part that could not be spent. At night the warehouses stand shoulder to shoulder in the dark, full and quiet, each one holding its hill of grain the way the halls hold their honeycombs of words. The watchman walks the line with his dog. The dog knows the round better than the man. Rats regret the whole district. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps, and under both of them, patient as ballast, lies the wheat, the first and last word of the whole story. The library's day ends at dusk, but its night shift works the oldest text of all. On the flat roof of the North Hall, reached by an outside stair worn smooth in the middle, the astronomers keep their instruments, and tonight 3 of them are up there, laying claim to the dark. The roof is nothing grand, A parapet, a water jar, a chest of instruments, a few reed mats and the sky. But what a sky! The city's lamps are low and warm and far below. The sea eats the northern horizon clean, and overhead the stars come out in their thousands upon thousands, the same stars as anywhere, but attended to here, expected, written down. This roof is where the sky is taken seriously, night after night, and the sky seems to know it. The senior man tonight is the one who was lying on the lawn. He is younger than his post, quick, a little untidy, and he is working through his program with the happy stubbornness of a man mid-argument with the universe. The point at issue is the moon's path, which refuses, as it has refused for generations, to be quite as tidy as the circles the geometers keep offering it. He measures and notes and measures again. The numbers pile up in his wax tablets like grain in a jar, and somewhere in that grain, he is sure of it, is the shape of the real answer, waiting to be winnowed out by someone. By him he hopes being human, by someone he would settle for being a scholar of this place, where every man works knowing that his tablets will outlive him and be read by sharper eyes unborn. His two juniors man the sighting instruments, the graduated rings and the long sighting bar, calling out numbers in the flat sing-song of their trade. Between measurements there is roof talk, the special languid talk of night shifts everywhere, whether the lighthouse keepers, over on their island, are watching the astronomers watch the sky, whether the moon problem will be solved in their lifetimes, whether the kitchen will have saved them anything besides olives, great matters and small, all weightless, all floating in the dark between one siding and the next. Below them, spread out, the city sleeps in its grid, and the sea folds and unfolds against the causeway, and the great light burns on its tower, the one star down here among them, faithfully doing its imitation of the ones above. Toward the middle of the night, the mist comes off the water, as it does, and the stars soften at the horizon, and the senior man calls it. Enough. The instruments are hooded and chested. The tablets are stacked and strapped. The three of them stand a last moment at the parapet, as roof workers always do, reluctant to trade the wide night for a stairwell. Tomorrow their numbers will go down into the halls, into the long ledgers of the sky that this library has kept, night upon night, year upon year, patient as shelving. No single night of it matters much. All of it together is one of the greatest things human beings have ever done, and it is being done here quietly by three tired men gathering their mats, one of whom is humming. The great light burns over the harbour, and the library sleeps, and over it the enormous catalogue of the stars turns one page westward, on schedule all night long. In a corner room off the second court, a lamp is still burning tonight, in defiance of every rule about lamps, because the man inside holds the one post that outranks the rules. He is the head of the library, the librarian, and this particular librarian is the man who measured the earth, and we may look in on him for a while, because he likes company and does not know we are here, which is the best arrangement of all. His name is Eratosthenes. He came from Cyrene, along the coast, and his enemies, who are really his friends, call him Beta, the second letter, because they say he is second best at everything, second best geometer, second best poet, second best geographer, second best critic. He has heard the nickname for years and pretends to mind. In truth, there is no first to his second, no other man who does all the things he does, and the joke has slowly turned into a compliment wearing a joke's clothing, the way long jokes do among people who love each other. The measuring of the earth, his great deed, was done not with heroics but with a well, a stick, and the library itself. He read, in one of the halls, A traveler's remark about midsummer noon in a town far up the river. On that noon, the sun stood so exactly overhead that it lit the bottom of a deep well. A stick cast no shadow there. He knew that here in Alexandria on the same noon, a stick does cast a shadow, a small one at a small angle, and he saw, in one of those quiet motions of the mind that move further than any ship, that the difference between no shadow there and a small shadow here was the curve of the world itself, caught in the act. The rest was arithmetic and honesty. The angle gave him the arc, the distance between the two towns, paced out by the royal surveyors who walk it for the caravan trade, gave him the length of that arc, and an arc and its angle give you the whole circle, and the whole circle came out at a number so vast that men laughed at it, and the number was near enough right. We know that now. He believed it then, on a spring evening not so different from this one, sitting where he sits now. He looked at a number on wax and understood. He was the first person to know the true size of the ground beneath every foot that had ever walked. Tonight he is at smaller work, revising his map of the world for the third time. He adds a river a traveler swears by. He moves a mountain range a day's march east on the strength of a merchant's diary. His map has parallels ruled across it, lines of his own invention. The net is thrown over the round world to hold every place in its right position relative to every other. The net has holes, and he knows it. Beyond a certain line to the south, conjecture. Beyond a certain line to the east, worse than conjecture, hope. He marks the edges of his knowledge honestly, the way this whole library has taught the world to do, and the empty margins of his map do not distress him. They are not failures. They are invitations, addressed to people not yet born, and he knows it, and it makes him cheerful to think of the map his map will someday become in better informed hands. The lamp gutters. He looks up, surprised at the hour, as he has been surprised at that same hour every night for 30 years. He rolls the map with the care of a man rolling up the world, blows out the lamp, and feels his way to the door through a darkness he knows by heart. The great light burns over the harbour, and the library sleeps, and its keeper walks to bed across a courtyard, whose exact position on the round earth he, alone of all sleepy men in history so far, could tell you to within a day's march. There is one more wonder in this city of wonders, and it is small and it drips. Alexandria keeps its hours by water, and the machines that do the keeping are the work of a local genius of the last generation, a barber's son named Ctesibius, who grew up among mirrors and razors and could not stop making things move. The library has 3 of his water clocks, and the finest of them stands in the entry court. And at night, when all the voices stop, you can hear it thinking. The principle is old and simple. Water dripping at a steady rate fills a vessel, and the rising level tells the hour. What the barber's son added was everything else. His clock feeds itself from a small header tank that keeps the pressure constant, so the drip never hurries or slackens. The rising float inside lifts a slender rod, and the rod carries a small bronze figure, a pointer in the shape of a winged boy who climbs, hour by hour, up a column marked with the day's divisions. And because the hours of daylight stretch and shrink with the seasons, the column itself turns. It presents a different scale for midsummer and midwinter, so that the little bronze boy always tells the truth, all year forever, at the price of a bucket of water a day. The scholars adore it, of course, being scholars, but the machine's true public is humbler. The kitchen boys time their bread by it. The porter sets his rounds by it. Visitors from up the river, farmers and boatmen in town for a festival, come to the court just to watch it, and stand before the climbing boy in silence. And now and then an old one will ask the porter, respectfully, whether the little fellow ever rests. The porter has developed his answer over 30 years. He rests when we do, he says, which is to say, the clock is stopped and cleaned once a year at the great festival, and that is true, and the old farmers go home satisfied, having met the one worker in Egypt with a lighter schedule than their own. See, Ctesibius made merrier things as well, and the palace has most of them. Singing birds worked by air and water, that whistle when the level rises, a horn that sounds by itself at dawn, a moving figure for processions that stands and sits. The treatises describing how are in the halls, catalogued, copied, argued over, and engineers not yet born, in cities not yet founded, will read grandchildren of those very scrolls and build grandchildren of these very machines. The dripping in the entry court is quiet, but it carries a long way. At this hour the little bronze boy is high on his column, past the middle of the night marks, climbing toward the dawn lines at his changeless pace. Drip and drip and drip. It is the most patient sound in the city, and the most companionable. Every building we have walked tonight is asleep around it, and it alone keeps working, taking no watch and needing no relief, counting the dark hours honestly on behalf of every sleeper in the quarter. If you are still awake to hear anything, let it be that. A steady drip in a stone court, each drop the same size as the last, each hour arriving exactly when it should, nothing required of you, nothing missed by you. The night in good hands that are not even hands. The great light burns over the harbour, and the library sleeps. The winged boy climbs slowly toward morning, right on time. Since we are awake among books tonight, or half awake, it is worth drifting for a chapter to the place where books are born. Not written, born. Every scroll in these halls began as a green reed, standing in the shallows of the delta, and the road from marsh to library is one of the oldest and gentlest of all made things. The papyrus plant grows in the slow, fresh water east and south of the city, and stands taller than a man, and the cutting of it is a trade as old as Egypt. The cutters work from flat boats in the cool hours, taking the fat triangular stems low, bundling them wet. A good stand regrows as fast as a hayfield. The marsh has been giving stems this way, and the country taking them, for 3,000 years, and neither party shows any sign of tiring of the arrangement. In the workshops at the marsh edge, the stems are peeled and the white inner pith is sliced into thin strips, wide as 2 fingers, long as a forearm. The strips are laid out side by side in a first layer, then a second layer is laid crosswise over them, and the 2 are pressed. That is all. No glue but the plant's own juice, no craft but evenness and patience. Under the press, the layers marry. Dried in shade, polished with a smooth stone or a shell, the sheet comes out pale, flexible, and faintly gleaming, with the fine cross grain that a writing hand learns to love, smooth one way for the pen, faintly ribbed the other, pleasant under a resting thumb. 20 sheets, pasted edge to edge and rolled, make a standard blank scroll, and the workshops sell them by the boatload. The library buys the finest grade in quantity, and the arrival of the papyrus boat at the lake harbor, every month or so, is a small holiday for the copying room. New paper is one of the permanent pleasures of the rioting life. The fast young copyist takes a fresh roll the way other young men take a new cloak. Even the old exact one will pause, first thing, and run his thumb across the grain of a new sheet, reading its quality in one stroke, before beginning to fill it with someone else's immortality. Consider, as you settle deeper into your pillow, the full journey of a single sheet. A reed drinks the river. A cutter takes its singing, because the cutters always sing, the rhythm being good for the work. A slicer slices, a presser presses, a polisher polishes. A boat carries it down the lake in the cool of morning. A copyist rules it faint, loads his reed pen and lays onto it, letter by letter, a play or a proof or a treatise on the pulse. A shelver files it in the honeycomb. A reader, years hence, pulls the very scroll and reads, and the thought crosses from a dead mind to a living one in perfect silence, over a bridge built of river reed. Every hall in this library, all those thousands of pigeonholes, is a marsh that learned to remember. The Egyptians knew it first and said it their own way. The plants of the river outlive the kings, they said. They were right for 3,000 years and are right tonight. The great light burns over the harbour. In the dark halls, the marsh-born pages lie quiet, holding everything, weighing nothing. South of the city, away from the sea, lies the other water, the lake, Merodes, broad and shallow and fresh, fed by the river's western branches, fringed for mile after mile with the reed country. And if the harbour is Alexandria's loud half, the lake is its quiet one. At night the quiet half is very quiet indeed, and we can afford to drift out onto it for one slow chapter, since drifting is the local art. The lake men live along the northern shore, in villages of mud, brick, and palm thatch that were old before the city was thought of. They fish, they ferry, they cut reeds, they keep ducks, and they move through the shallows in flat-bottomed skiffs poled along channels. Their families have kept open for 10 generations. A lake channel is an inheritance, like an orchard. It silts and you clear it, and your son clears it after you, and everyone on the water knows whose channel is whose, by landmarks no stranger could ever see. Tonight the lake lies like dark oiled cloth, and the reed country stands over its own reflection, 10 feet tall, holding the day's warmth. The papyrus is not the only crop out there. There are rushes for matting, sedge for rope, wildfowl for the pot, and the lake fish that the city fries at every corner. But papyrus is the noble one, the money reed, and the stands where it grows thickest are leased and watched and handed down, and every workshop along the shore knows its own, stands the way a vintner knows his rose. A skiff is out late tonight, one lamp at its bow, sliding home along a channel with the last load of the day, and the boy poling it is half asleep on his feet, which on a lake skiff is a skill, not a failing. His grandfather sits in the stern amid the wet green bundles, entirely asleep, or so it appears. Yet each time the channel bends, the old man's hand finds the gunwale, and the skiff leans true, because 60 years on a water teaches the body to stand its own watch after the mind has gone to bed. The night birds own everything out here. Herons stand along the margins like patient clerks. Ducks mutter in the reed roots, resettling. Somewhere far out, a pelican folds onto the water with a sound like a dropped cushion, and the ripples travel a mile with nothing to stop them, and pass under the skiff, and lift it once, gently, the way a sleeping parent's chest lifts a resting child. From the middle of the lake, the city is a low glow along the northern sky, and the lighthouse shows above it, a bright point over the black line of the shore. The lake men use it too, though it was not built for them. Coming home late across the wide water, a man lines up the great light with the notch of his own village palm trees, and that line is a street home. The tower serves the smallest boats on the quiet water as faithfully as the tallest ships on the loud one, and asks no toll of either. The skiff finds its landing. The boy wakes fully in the last 10 yards, as boat children do, and makes the line fast, and the two of them walk up between the drying racks to the village, where supper has been kept warm on the banked oven, because it always is. Tomorrow, the wet bundles will start their journey to the slicing tables, and some part of tonight's load one sheet out of thousands, will end its days in the honeycomb halls, with words on it that outlast every king. The reed country neither knows nor cares. It has water, warmth, and mud, and it will make more. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps, and far to the south the lake lies black and patient, rocking the last skiffs home. On the seaward side of the Mausian, past the second garden, the physicians keep their own courts, and their evening has a flavor of its own, herbs and beeswax and clean linen, and it is a good place to walk slowly at the day's end, breathing in. Alexandria is the best place in the world, just now, to be a student of the body. The medical men here have standing and books and time, and the result is a school whose graduates are wanted in every court and port on the sea. The great names of the last generation worked in these rooms, tracing with patience and awe the body's hidden architecture, the vessels and their gates, the nerves like fine rigging, the heart's chambers working their double doors. Their treatises stand in the honeycombs now, argued over daily, and the arguing is the point. Here, unlike most places, a young physician is taught to say the three hard words, "I was wrong," and the fourth harder phrase, "Let us look again." At this hour the teaching is done, and the halls belong to the evening chores, which in medicine are gentle ones. In the herb room, the year's gatherings hang from the beams in paper-dry bundles, and an apprentice works down the row with a ladder, turning them, sniffing each like a cook. Below him the shelves hold the jars, honey and oil and wine of every grade, poppy and willow bark, salts and gums from 3 continents, each vessel labeled in the same neat catalogue, hand the library uses, because the librarians taught them, and a pharmacy, when you think of it, is only a library whose books are swallowed. In the long ward across the court, the day's patients rest. It is a small ward, more teaching room than hospital, a dozen low beds, and tonight it holds a harbor man with a mended shoulder, a feverish child asleep at last with her mother beside her, and an old rope maker who is here mostly because he is old and alone, and the senior physician has never once mentioned this to him. The evening round is made by lamplight, wrist by wrist. The pulse is this school's great instrument. Read here with a subtlety no one else approaches, its speed and depth and rhythm all telling, and the seniors teach the juniors to count it against a small water clock, and then in time to put the clock away and simply know. The senior physician tonight is a calm gray woman from Kos, the island of healers, where her family has practiced since anyone can remember. She ends her round at the child's bed. She listens and nods, and tells the mother the fever has turned, using the exact plain words her own teacher used, because in this trade the right sentence, plainly said at the right hour, is medicine as surely as anything in the jars. The mother's shoulders come down for the first time in 2 days. That too is on the curriculum here, though it appears in no treatise. Watch the family's shoulders, her teacher used to say. You treat the whole room. Lamps low, linen folded. The apprentice climbs down from the last of the herbs, and the smell of the room follows him out the door a little way, as it follows everyone, clinging to sleeves, sweet and dusty and green. Physicians' wives can tell the day's work by it. Cut grass and honey means a good day. Tonight is cut grass and honey. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps, and in the small ward the water clock drips on untended, keeping the pulse of the building slow and full and even. Not all of this city's letters live in the great halls. Most of them, in truth, live in places like the one we visit now, a rented room by the harbor wall with benches, a water jar, and a floor of scuffed sand, where a schoolmaster of no fame whatever teaches the children of clerks and shipwrites their alphabet. The library is where the letters are kept. This is where they are planted. And at evening, with the pupils long gone home, it is one of the quietly important rooms in the world. The master is correcting wax. His pupils write on hinged wooden tablets faced with beeswax, letters scratched with a stylus, errors smoothed away with the flat end. And each evening he works through the days stack by lamplight, tablet by tablet, the way a farmer walks his rows, alpha wobbling but willing, beta reversed again, third day running by the sailmaker's small stubborn son, a whole line copied clean and true by the carpenter's daughter, who is quicker than her brothers, and the master has begun, without saying anything to anyone, setting her harder lines. His own copy of Homer sits on the shelf end, wrapped in cloth. It is a cheap copy, made in a fast workshop, with 2 lines missing in the 6th book and a wine stain shaped like cypress. He bought it with his first year's fees and has taught from it for 30 years. And if you told him that across town there were halls holding 100 Homers, old ones, grand ones, corrected ones, he would nod, because he knows, and he has been twice. On his rest days, some years back, he climbed the hill to the daughter library and read the good text and cop it out, in his careful schoolmaster's hand. The 2 lines his own copy lacks, and they are pinned inside the wrapping cloth now, and that is his link to everything we have walked through tonight. And it is not a small one. It is the whole system working, because this is how the memory of the world actually travels, not hull to hull, hand to hand. A scholar corrects a text. A temple librarian shelves the corrected copy, where a schoolmaster can reach it. The schoolmaster carries 2 lines home across a city in his head, murmuring them so as not to spill. And in the morning a sailmaker's son, scratching his reversed betas, hears his teacher recite the 6th book entire, wine stain, pinned lines and all, and some spark of it sticks. It will still be with the boy at sea in 40 years, on a night watch under stars. He will find himself saying poetry to the steering oar, unable to tell you where it came from. The master finishes the stack, stands the tablets on their edges to face the morning, and permits himself his single nightly extravagance, 1 cup of the thin local wine, taken standing in the doorway, looking down the darkened street toward the water. Tomorrow letters, the day after letters. He has taught 1,100 children to read, by his own occasional reckoning, and has been thanked formally by perhaps 6, and considers, on the evidence of his own contentment, that he is among the wealthiest men in Alexandria. The great light burns over the harbour, and the library sleeps, and all over the city, in 100 scuffed rooms like this one, tomorrow's readers lie dreaming, their letters still wet in the wax. Across the city, on the one real hill this flat shore possesses, above the old quarter where the fishing village used to stand, there is a second library. The scholars call it the daughter, and if the Mousean is the crown's library, the daughter is the city's, and at evening it closes with a different and homelier music that is worth walking uphill to hear. The hill is called Racodes, and the great temple on it, the Serapeum, belongs to the whole mixed city in a way no other place quite does. Its god Serapis was made here, deliberately, a generation back, woven by priests and king together out of Egyptian and Greek threads both, so that everyone in this two-hearted city would have somewhere to stand together. Whatever one thinks of gods made by committee, the place took. The courts of the Serapeum on a festival day hold half of Alexandria, and its colonnades lined with book rooms hold the overflow of the Mousean's halls. Thousands of scrolls, the working copies, the duplicates, the good honest second best of everything. Beta's library, someone once called it, in the librarian's hearing. He laughed for some time. What makes the daughter different is who reads there. The Mousian belongs to the 100, the kept scholars in their birdcage. The Serapeum's books belong to whoever climbs the hill. The harbour master's clerk reads there on his rest days, working slowly through the histories. Schoolmasters come to check their Homer against a sounder copy. Ship's pilots consult the sailing directions. A grain merchant's daughter, who has taught herself letters nobody planned for her to have, comes on quiet afternoons for the poets. And one of the temple librarians, without ever saying a word about it, has taken to leaving the best copies on the low, accessible shelf. At closing time tonight, the temple sweepers move down the colonnades with their palm brooms, and the last readers surface and stretch, exactly as the scholars did across town. For reading is the same posture in every rank of life and leaves the same crick in every neck. The temple librarian walks his shelves, squaring the day's disorder. He knows his collection is the second collection. He also knows, in the way workers know things their institutions never say aloud, that a book is only fully alive when anybody may read it. Down in the royal quarter, the mother library keeps the treasures safe. Up here on the hill in the salt wind, the copies do the actual daily work of being read, and wear out doing it, and are copied again. And he is content with his end of the bargain, and would not trade. He bars the book rooms, nods to the night priests beginning their rounds among the lamps, and steps out onto the temple platform. The whole city lies below him in the last blue light. The grid and the gardens, the two harbors, the causeway, the tower with its new-lit fire. From up here, you can see the shape of the whole idea. A city built where the river's gifts meet the sea's roads, with a light to bring the ships, and halls to keep what the ships bring, and a hill where anyone at all can climb up and read it. He goes down the steps into the old quarter, where the smell of frying fish says evening as plainly as any bell, and is home in time for supper, like everyone else. The great light burns over the harbor, and both libraries sleep now. Mother and daughter, one in the gardens, one on the hill, dreaming in duplicate. Between the day's work and the night's sleep, this city, like every city of its world, has a hinge, and the hinge is hot water. The baths of Alexandria fill at the end of the working day, the way the harbor fills at the end of the sailing season, with everyone. And by this hour of the night they have emptied again, and are doing what baths do at night, which is tick and drip and cool. And it is a lovely building to be invisible in, so let us end our city rounds there. The bathhouse by the theater is neither the grandest nor the meanest, which is why everyone goes. In the last hour of daylight it held at once two of our copyists, the harbour master's clerk, a delegation of grain inspectors, the young astronomer, half the crew of a Rhodian freighter, and the schoolmaster, each of them soaking away a different day in the same water. The baths are the one room in Alexandria, with no shelving and no rank. Steam is a great leveler. So is the shared, absolute, and international conviction that the hot pool is better than whatever anyone was doing before the hot pool. The routine is old and satisfying. Oil first and the scraper, working the day off the skin in long strokes. Then the warm room where the talk is, all the city's talk, softened by echo into one warm burble in which harbor news and philosophy, and the price of figs become indistinguishable, which is possibly what philosophy always wanted. Then the hot plunge. Every human being enters it in exactly the same way, regardless of nation, station, or school of thought, with a hiss, a settling, and a long sigh of pure agreement. And then, for the brave, the cold basin, and for the wise, the warm bench, And for everyone, eventually, the slow reassembly of a clean person into their evening clothes, and the walk home through the dusk with damp hair, and a soul 2 sizes larger. The furnace man has the night's last duty. His fires under the floors are banked at closing, raked low and covered, so that the great masonry stays warm through the night, and need not be heated from cold at dawn. And this nightly banking is a craft, like the castle hearths of other lands in later centuries. Too little cover and the heat dies, too much and the fuel wastes. He has done it 9,000 times, and he does it tonight in the dark by sound and smell alone, and then sits a while on the warm floor with his supper, in the empty, ticking, dripping building, entirely at peace. Every trade has its secret hour. This is his. The whole vast apparatus of pipes and pools rests around him like a great animal cooling after work, and the floor under him will stay faintly warm until morning, and so, therefore, will he. Outside, the city is bathed, fed, and horizontal. There is no cleaner, sleepier hour in the whole turning of the day. The great light burns over the harbour, and the library sleeps, and under the dark bathhouse floors the banked fires keep their covered warmth till dawn, the way the halls keep theirs. On our way back through the royal quarter, one building is still warm from company, and it is worth a last pause. The theatre gave a play tonight, an old comedy, well loved, and the crowd has only lately gone. An empty theatre, just after a performance, is one of the gentlest places a city owns, and this one, curved against its low hill with its face to the sea, is gentler than most. The house holds thousands, tier above tier of stone seats rising in their great half-circle, and every seat is empty now, and all of them together are still faintly, humanly warm. The sweepers work down the aisles by lantern light, finding what audiences always leave: a sandal, a child's toy horse, fig skins beyond counting, a cushion forgotten by somebody's grandmother, which will wait in the gatekeeper's alcove for her return, because she comes to every play and forgets a cushion at roughly every third one, and the gatekeeper regards the cushion as part of the theater's permanent furnishings by now. Backstage, in the low rooms behind the stage building, the company is folding itself away. The masks go into their chests, each in its linen bag, the old men's faces and the young lovers' faces and the cook's face with its splendid outraged eyebrows, all stacked in the dark like a village asleep. The costumes are shaken, folded, and laid in cedar. The 3 actors, who between them were 14 people tonight, sit for a while on the prop hampers in their own single faces, tired in the particular scoured way that only performing leaves, sharing the last of the wine that the leading man's admirers sent round, of which the leading man, to his credit, always pours first for the man who worked the crane. Tonight's play was one of the hall's own children, in a sense. The library keeps the master texts of the old comedies, and touring companies copy their parts from these very halls, so that the jokes told tonight to a laughing harbor city were checked, at some point, letter by letter, against a scroll in a pigeonhole by a man with ink under his nails. The fast young copyist was in the audience tonight, in fact, on the top tier with his supper club, and laughed so hard at the cook's great speech that he lost his fig, and never once thought about the text as a text, which is exactly the correct way for a copyist to spend his evening off. Now the lanterns go out one by one. The gatekeeper walks the top tier last, as he likes to do, pausing at the rim where the whole dark bowl of the theater lies below him and the sea glimmers beyond the stage. Thousands of evenings have poured through this house, laughter and weeping and applause like weather, and every one of them has drained away by midnight through these same aisles, leaving the stone rinsed and quiet. He finds the silence afterward better than any play, though he would not say so in the company's hearing. He bars the upper gate and goes down the long stair, and the theater settles into the hillside for the night, holding its hollow of warm air up to the stars like a cupped hand. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps, and in the theater's dark chests 14 folded faces sleep too, dreaming, if masks dream, of tomorrow's crowd. Between the closing of the halls and the deep of the night, there is an hour when Alexandria simply goes home, all of it at once, and it is a fine hour to be abroad in, invisible as we are, walking against the tide of suppers. The main street, the Canopic Way, runs the length of the city, east to west, wide as a parade and straight as a ruled line, and at this hour it carries everyone. Clerks from the royal offices with ink on their fingers, porters swinging empty yokes, a pastry seller crying the last of his tray at half price, then at any price, then giving up and eating one himself with the frank enjoyment of a man who knows his own work is good. 2 priests of Serapis walking with the special, unhurried gait of men whose God is not going anywhere. A gaggle of students from the medical school, loud with the day's anatomy, going abruptly quiet as they pass a pretty flower stall, then loud again, at a slightly higher pitch. Turn off the great street, and the city changes key. The side streets are narrow and full of supper. Charcoal smoke, oil garlic the sea. Doors stand open onto courtyards where lamps are being lit, and each open door is a small theater playing the same play. Table being laid, child being called twice, 3 times, the third time in the tone that works, an old woman on a stool by her threshold, done with her day's spinning, watching the street with the settled authority of the resident elder, missing nothing, needing nothing, entirely satisfied with the evening's programming. In the Egyptian quarter under the hill, the oldest part of this young city, the evening runs as it has run since before Alexander was a name anyone knew. Flat roofs catching the last warmth, bread coming off clay ovens that were old when the library was a drawing in the sand, a fisherman's family eating the unsold catch, which is the fisherman's quiet tax and privilege. Down at the lake harbor on the city's landward side, the papyrus boats and produce barges lie snugged for the night, and the lake men sleep aboard under reed mats, rocked by water their grandfathers were rocked by. And through it all, threading home like everyone else, go the library's own, the shelvers to their rented rooms, the kitchen boys racing. The fast young copyist goes to a supper club of other fast young men. There he will talk too much about his hand, and be teased, and pay for the wine, in the immemorial manner of the slightly too proud everywhere. The old exact copyist walks the long way, along the seawall, as he has walked for 40 years. He stops at the same stone as always. He watches the light on the water for the length of time it takes to eat 2 olives. Then he goes home to his wife, who asks what he copied today, as she has asked for 40 years. And he tells her. She says, as she has said for 40 years, that it sounds a great deal better in his voice than it could possibly be on paper. On the evidence, a long marriage and a long book are made of the same material, small maintained acts daily for decades. By the second hour of darkness, the streets have gone quiet, given over to cats and watchmen, and the sea sound that never stops and is never noticed. The city lies in its grid like script on a ruled sheet, every household a word, every lamp a letter. And now, one by one, the letters are going out. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps. And around it, in every direction, 250,000 people are lying down in the dark of the same warm night. The library lives inside the royal quarter, the way a heart lives inside a body, and at night the quarter around it settles into a hush with servants in it, which is a very particular kind of hush, expensive and well-maintained. The quarter takes up a third of the city, along the best of the shore, and it is less a palace than a small country of palaces, gardens, courts, and porticos, added reign upon reign, each king building beside his father rather than over him, so that walking through it is walking through the family's whole story, told in masonry. Tonight it lies mostly dark. The court is at dinner somewhere deep inside, and the affairs of the kingdom have shrunk, as they do each evening, to one lit wing, a handful of windows, a smell of roasting meat, and a thread of harp music that unspools across the lawns and gets lost among the fountains. The night business of a palace is maintenance, and the maintainers are abroad, lamplighters with their ladders, moving down the porticos at a pace no king has ever managed to hurry, gardeners doing the night watering, because water given at noon here is water given to the sun, a sweeper working the great steps by feel, guards at their stations, leaning on spears in the settled manner of night guards everywhere, awake enough, dignified enough, thinking about supper. The kings of this house love the library, the way other royal houses love hunting or war. It is their extravagance and their monument, and they compete with their own ancestors over it. Each reign tries to add more scrolls than the last. Envoys abroad have standing instructions about books. Fortunes go out, year after year, for old copies of old poets. And when the treasury men grumble, and treasury men always grumble, the answer from the top has been the same for 3 reigns. Fleets rot, walls fall. This is the only thing we buy that gets more valuable the older it grows. Whatever else may be said about kings, and much may be said, a family that spends like that on memory has understood something. Tonight the reigning one is at dinner, hosting a delegation, and the after-dinner entertainment, we may as well know, will be a reading. A scholar from the Mausian, the poet who leaned into the squid, has been sent for, scrolls under his arm, sandals hastily corrected, and he will read to the court by lamplight and be good at it, and eat afterward from the king's own leavings, which is an honor, and also, by the unanimous testimony of scholars in every age, the best food arrangement of the whole appointment. We need not stay for the party. The quarter's real evening is out here, among the maintainers. The last lamplighter finishes his portico and stands his ladder against the wall for the morning man. The gardeners coil their leather hose. The harp thread winds up into silence, and applause follows it, small and far, like weather in another country. Window by window, the lit wing goes dark, until only the guards' braziers remain, and the porticos hand their lamplight down the long colonnades to nobody. At the quarter's edge, against the garden wall, the library's halls stand in their own deeper dark, flameless by their own strict law, all but the one small shrine lamp the porter watches. From the palace roofs you could pick them out by that very darkness, a black rectangle among the glimmers, and know it at once for what it is, the one treasury in the whole quarter too precious to light. The great light burns over the harbour, and the library sleeps in the dark it insists on, the safest dark in the kingdom. We passed it in the dark at the start of our night, and it deserves its own quiet visit before the round is done. West of the causeway, behind its own moles and its own chain, lies the second harbour, the closed one, the harbour of the kings. The war fleet lies there, and the war fleet is asleep, and a sleeping navy is one of the most peaceful sights this world has to offer, precisely because of what it is. The great ships do not float at anchor overnight. They are drawn up out of the water, like boats on a beach, but grandly. All along the royal waterfront stand the ship sheds, long roofed slipways side by side, each one holding a warship the way a scabbard holds a blade. The hulls rest on greased timbers, dry, shadowed, smelling of pine tar and cedar. Their bronze beaks, each worth a merchant's fortune, gleam faintly at the shed mouths, just above the lapping water. Dry ships last, wet ships soften. Every navy of this sea knows the rule, and so the fleet spends its nights ashore, in its own long bedroom, ranked and roofed and still. Understand what these sheds hold, and then let the thought soften. The kings of Egypt keep one of the great fleets of the world, fast triple-banked warships, courier galleys, the huge showpiece vessels that carry the court on the river in festival season. 300 oars to a big ship, sometimes more. In motion, such a ship is a marvel of timing and muscle. At rest, she is only a long, wooden animal breathing tar into the dark, and her 300 oars sleep in racks along the shed walls, blade upward, like reeds in winter. The night guard here is a small one, and it is enough. The chain is up across the harbor mouth, floated on timber balks, and the chain is the whole argument. 2 old petty officers walk the shed line at intervals with a lantern, more caretakers than sentries. Both are past rowing age. Both have salt-white eyebrows and opinions about everything afloat. Their round takes an hour if the talk is thin, and 2 if it is good, and tonight it is good, because the fleet is to exercise next week. And exercises are to old sailors what festivals are to everyone else. They walk the line, shed by shed, lantern lights sliding along the curved flanks. Each ship has her name painted at the bow, and her small shrine shelf inside the shed, and her reputation, which the 2 men recite to each other as they pass, though both know every word. This one stiff in a quartering sea, this one lucky, this one the flagship, so sweet on the steering oars that helmsmen ask for her by name, and her keel is older than either of the men, and has been rebuilt plank by plank around its own fame until no one can say which timber is original, and no one cares. A ship's name gathers the honor. The wood merely takes its turn. At the head of the line on the mole stands the little lighthouse of the closed harbor, a modest cousin of the great tower across the water, burning its own small fire for nobody, since nobody enters by night. The 2 officers end their round beside it, as always, and stand a while looking out at the chained water, the still sheds, the distant beam of the great light sweeping past above the breakwater. Neither of them says what both of them think every night at this spot, that this is the best duty of their lives, that a fleet asleep in its sheds, in a harbor closed by a chain, in a city fed by a river that never fails, is the whole point of everything their scarred hands ever did at sea. Peace is not the absence of the fleet. Peace is the fleet dry, greased, ranked and snoring, with 2 old men and a small fire watching over it. They bank the mole fire, and turn back along the sheds toward their supper. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps, and beside it the king's 300 quiet wooden ships sleep too, high and dry, dreaming in tar. Every institution has one person who closes it, truly closes it, and at the library that person is the night porter, and his last round is the day's actual ending, whatever the clerk's ledgers say. We have seen him at the edges of this evening, nodding to copyists, lantern in the garden. Now, past the middle of the night, he does his full walk, and we will do it with him, because there is no better tour of a sleeping building than the closer's round, and no better company than a man doing a thing he has done 10,000 times. He is Egyptian, 60 or so, and he was born under the hill in Rakotes, and worked the lake boats before his knee sent him ashore. 30 years now at the library. He cannot read. This should be said plainly and then never dwelt on, because he does not dwell on it. He is the man who keeps the books through the dark hours, and whether the marks inside them are open to him has never once mattered to the quality of his keeping. He knows the halls better than the scholars, better than the shelvers, the way the shepherd knows a hillside better than the men who own it. His round is a fixed line, door by door, hall by hall, and his lantern is a closed one, tin with pinholes, throwing a fine spray of light points on the walls as he goes, never an open flame. First the copying room, where he checks the linen covers on the desks with 2 fingers, and stoppers, every third night or so, some ink pot the fast young man has forgotten, and forgives him silently, as he forgives him everything, having decided years ago that the boy reminds him of a colt he once liked. Then the reading halls, 1, 2, 3, where his light points swim over the tables like minnows. Then the honeycomb halls, the long ones. Here his walk slows, and this is the part of the round nobody has ever seen, because a man alone at night in his own domain is a different man. He trails the fingers of his free hand along the shelf ends as he goes, lightly, the way you trail a hand along a boat's gunwale, and he speaks. Not much, a word here, a phrase there, in the Egyptian of the lake villages. Easy now, asleep then, old ones you first. He is talking to the scrolls and knows he is, and would stop at once if any other foot sounded in the hall, and no other foot ever has. He has his favorites, the oldest scroll, the wasp nest one. He greets every night, last of all, at the pigeonhole the shelvers dust with a feather. He calls it grandfather. He has been told, roughly, what it is, a voice from up the river, older than the city, older than the Greeks, and he stands before it each night for the length of one slow breath. Rest, grandfather. The house is shut. Then the doors, each tested with the flat of his hand, the garden gate chained, the porter's own lamp, trimmed for the hours till dawn. He settles onto his stool in the entry, back against the doorpost worn to the shape of backs, and takes out his supper, bread and white cheese and 3 olives, and eats it slowly, listening to the building. A building at night says what it is. Granaries tick and rustle. Temples ring faintly, holding their stone tension. The library breathes. That is the only word he has ever found for it. The held hush of 100,000 voices all pausing at once, forever, mid-sentence, waiting for morning and the next reader. It is company of a kind, the best he knows except his wife, asleep under the hill, who will ask him nothing in the morning, because 30 years ago she asked what happens at the library at night, and he said nothing, it sleeps, and I keep it. And that was the whole truth then, and is the whole truth tonight. The great light burns over the harbour, and the library sleeps, and one man who cannot read a word of it sits in the doorway holding all of it, entirely safe. We are not, of course, alone with the porter. No building in Egypt is ever quite empty, because this is the country of the cat, and the library, of all the buildings in all the world, is theirs by the oldest of rights. Papyrus draws mice, mice draw cats. The arrangement predates the library, predates the city, possibly predates the writing itself, and no institution in Egypt has ever been foolish enough to interfere with it. The library keeps, at present count, which is to say at the kitchen's feeding count, 9. They are not owned. Cats in Egypt are not owned. They are affiliated, and these 9 have affiliated themselves with the halls of the Mousian, for the same reasons the scholars did. The food is regular, the company is quiet, and the shelving is excellent. By day they are visitors, folding themselves onto warm windowsills in the reading halls, inspecting the copyists from atop the honeycombs, being removed with ceremony from the exact center of whatever scroll a scholar has just unrolled. For a sun-warmed sheet of papyrus is to a cat what a made bed is, An invitation it would be rude to refuse. The scholars grumble and are ignored. The old grammarian keeps dried fish in his sleeve and pretends he does not. The fish man, being the fish man, is the most beloved human in the building and knows it and trades on it shamelessly, buying with sardines a devotion his colleagues cannot earn with philosophy. But it is at night that the library truly belongs to the nine. When the porter's round is done and his stool creaks its last, the halls change owners. Down from the sills, out from behind the honeycombs, along the tables in one soft line, tails up, a procession of small night watchmen taking over the shift. They walk the same round the porter walked, more or less, hall by hall, though their inspection is of a different order, conducted at floor level and taking in matters no lantern finds. Somewhere in the second hall, a mouse considers the evening and thinks better of it. That is the whole engagement most nights. The nine are less hunters than a garrison whose reputation does the work, and the hall's real defense is simply their presence, padding down the dark aisles, sitting bolt upright in a doorway with that air cats have of attending to an announcement no one else can hear. The senior cat, a big seal dark female the kitchen calls Tomiu, which is simply the cat, as the senior cat here has always been called, ends her round where the porter ends his in the entry at his feet. She has her place by his stool. He has always a last olive's worth of cheese. Neither acknowledges the arrangement, which has been in force for 11 years. She settles chest to the cool floor, paws folded under, facing the dark halls, eyes closing to slits that do not quite close. And that is the library's night watch complete. One man who cannot read, 9 cats who cannot either, and between them, guarded absolutely, the entire written memory of the human race. If you want a fact to fall asleep on, you could do far worse than that one. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps, and its smallest keeper watches the dark with lamp-yellow eyes, purring at nothing on duty. Deep in the night now, with the whole quarter dark and even the palace kitchens cold, we may permit ourselves one unscholarly chapter. No one is awake to correct us. Let us wonder what this place dreams, and let the wondering be soft and unrigorous, the way thoughts go at this hour, just before your own dreams take the pen from your hand. The scholars dream what workers dream, their work transfigured. The young astronomer, flat in his bed as he was flat on the lawn, dreams the moon problem, and in the dream the untidy numbers rise off his tablets like waterbirds off the lake and wheel once and settle into a curve of perfect sense. And dreaming, he understands it entirely, and knows he will not be able to keep it, and does not mind. The dream is not the answer. The dream is the promise that there is one. The old grammarian dreams in margins, small corrections drifting down like leaves onto pages wide as fields, each landing exactly where it belongs. 60 years of tiny rescues falling gently and forever through a warm library the size of the world. The fast young copyist dreams, to be honest, mostly of himself, of a hand so famous that kings request it. He is 22. The dream is forgivable, and half of it will even come true, and by the time it does, he will have stopped needing it, which is how that particular story usually goes when it goes well. The porter dreams of the lake, green light through papyrus, the boat's rock, his father's voice at the steering oar. The halls he guards never enter his dreams at all. And this is right, for the deepest form of trust is not to dream of a thing, the way you do not dream of your own heartbeat. And the library itself, if a building can be said to hold a dream, hold it in the grain of its shelving and the hush of its halls, then what this one holds might be something like this. All its voices at once, not quarreling for once, the poets and the geometers and the physicians and the map-makers, the Greek and the Egyptian and the languages nobody could place, all speaking together very low, the way a harbor full of moored ships speaks in rope and water, 100,000 scrolls saying, each in its own tongue, the same single thing. Remember, not a command, a lullaby. Remember, remember in the dark to no one, to everyone to you, and in the harbor of dreams, as in the real one, a light burns over the water, so that nothing drifting tonight, no ship and no sleeper need ever be lost. The great light burns, and the library sleeps, and you may go now at any point you choose into your own halls, whose keeper is kind, and whose shelves are your own. There is an hour past the middle of the night that belongs to no one. The suppers are long over, and the bakers not yet risen. Even the cats have completed their rounds. The city lies at its lowest ebb, and lowest ebb, sailors will tell you, is the stillest water. And this chapter is that hour, and nothing will happen in it on my word. Stand one last time tonight, somewhere high. The lighthouse gallery will do, with the old keeper, who is on the dawn watch and has just relieved his junior, and who stands where he stood at dusk, at the parapet, with the fire at his back turning the stones of the gallery the color of bread crust. Below him, the whole invention lies still. The two harbors, black glass, the moored fleets, motionless, every hull holding its sleepers, hundreds of them, sailors of a dozen nations breathing in a dozen rhythms under one dark. The causeway, a pale seam across the water, the grid of the city, lampless now, drawn in starlight only, the long straight streets running away east and west like ruled lines on a page that has been written full and set aside to dry. The sea makes its endless quiet statement against the breakwater. The fire behind him eats another log evenly. Far off south over the lake, a night heron says one word and thinks better of the rest. He can hold the whole city in one look at this hour, and without ever having been taught the habit, he counts it, the way keepers count. The palace dark and well, the temple hill dark and well, the theater's shell, the stadium's long back dark and well, and the low halls in the garden quarter where they keep, so he has been told, everything anyone has ever written down. Dark and well, he has wondered about that place on many such watches, what it would be to stand in a room with every voice that ever spoke wisely, all of them silent and present at once. He suspects it would feel like this gallery at this hour, all the world below you, all of it asleep, all of it in your keeping, and none of it needing a single thing from you until morning. He puts another log on, not because the fire needs it, but because being a little ahead of need is the whole of his profession. And the long light stands out over the water, steady, hour after hour. Hold that turning light as long as you like. It asks nothing. It marks nothing. It only says all night, at intervals, the one thing lighthouses and refrains exist to say. I still hear, I still hear, I still hear. The great light burns over the harbor, and the library sleeps, and the deepest hour passes over them both like a slow wave that never breaks. The east goes gray before anyone in Alexandria admits it. The stars thin out over the delta first, the sky there turning the color of the inside of an oyster shell, and the north wind drops for its strange short rest, the lull that fishermen call the wind changing its watch. The lake men wake first, as water people do. Along the lake harbor the reed mats stir, The papyrus boats rock as their crews rise, and the first hulls slip out onto water so still that each boat seems to be climbing its own reflection. Then the bakers, whose ovens under the hill have held their embers like a secret all night, and who now feed them and set the first loaves in, so that the oldest quarter of the city, as usual, smells like morning a full hour before morning arrives. The fishing fleet goes out on the land breeze, sails filling softly, hulls counting the low swells, and the boy from the breakwater is aboard his uncle's boat, asleep sitting up, and no one wakes him, because the nets are not yet ready, and sleep is the one cargo you cannot reload. In the royal quarter, the maintainers return, gardeners first with the dew, then the kitchen smoke, then the sweepers on the great steps, working down as the light works down the lighthouse tower opposite, stage by stage, square, 8-sided, round, until the tower stands entire in the pearl-colored morning, and its fire, which has not gone out, becomes merely invisible, which is not at all the same thing. And at the library, the day begins exactly as it has begun for 3 generations. The porter unbars the garden gate for the kitchen boys. The shelvers arrive, yawning, and open the shutters of the first hall, and the early light comes in level and lies down the long floor as if it, too, had a reading place it preferred. Ta Miu relinquishes the entry and collects her tribute at the kitchen door. She folds herself onto the first warm sill to supervise the arriving day. The old exact copyist crosses the second court at his fixed hour, greets the porter by name as he has done 10,000 times. He uncovers his desk, unstoppers his ink, and takes up the very sentence he left sleeping at dusk, so that the first sound of the working day in the copying room is the same soft, dry whisper that was its last, as though the night were only a long breath taken between 2 words. The scholars will drift in with the morning. The quarrel about Homer will resume at breakfast, on schedule. Somewhere down at the great harbour, a ship from Cyprus is already warping in, and somewhere aboard her, sure as sunrise, there is a scroll. That is the whole of our evening. We told you at the start that nothing would happen, and nothing did, and that nothing was everything. A fire tended, scrolls put to bed and taken up again, a city that built a lamp for ships and a house for memory, doing both jobs through one more ordinary night. Out of the thousands and thousands it was given, and if some far-off morning the holes are gone, and the tower is gone, and even the shoreline has wandered, then hold this instead, because this is what was true. Not one of those scrolls ever really slept alone. Every line in every hall was somebody's long night of work, somebody's rescue, somebody's love carried up a gangplank or down a marsh. That kind of keeping does not wear out, and it cannot be misplaced. You have some of it in your own house. You have some of it at this moment in your own head, going soft and warm at the edges as sleep comes in. The lamps are out. The keepers are relieved. The great light has handed the harbour over to the sun, and the library, the dear improbable library, is open again, full of morning with its whole long day, its whole long life still ahead of it, and every one of its evenings safe. This one too, this one especially, asleep now. The house is shut. The light is kept. This was worlds before morning. Good night.